Policy Institute at the University of the Bahamas is charged with the responsibility of promoting dialogue in matters of public policy, conducting research in matters of public policy, providing consulting services in matters of public policy, and also providing training to both private and public sector individuals in matters of public policy. In the course of our promoting dialogue in an effort to ensure that while people have their opinions on matters, come to matters through their prisms, and come to matters through their partisanship, we try to bring objectivity, research, and evidence-based discussions about matters. And as a public policy institute, there is no better way to understand and receive understanding of public policy matters than to hear them from the directors of public policy, which happens to be, in our instance, the members of the cabinet. And so for that reason, we have now for years been inviting ministers to bring lectures to you, to the university, to the community on policies within their areas of responsibility. And tonight, we are having one such presentation. And I might add, while we have considered all of them important, hearing from the Minister of National Security in the environment in which we presently exist and have existed for some time is one of the most important discussions I think that we could have. And someone who I believe is uniquely placed to speak to this issue is in that office today. My name is Shivago Lang, and I'm the Executive Director and the Senior Policy Fellow in the Government and Public Policy Institute. And I'm again delighted that you are here with us tonight. I'm going to ask you please to stand with me as we sing our nation's national anthem. And while the person who was to lead this is not here, you're going to have to tolerate my at least leading you in it. But you are going to sing with me. Lift up your heads to the rising sun, Bahamaland. March on to glory, your bright banners waving high. See how the world marks the manner of your bearing. Pledge to excel through love and unity. Pressing onward, march together to a common loftier goal. Steady sunward, though the weather hides the wide and treacherous shoal. Lift up your head to the rising sun, Bahamaland, till the road you've trod leads unto your God. March on, Bahamaland. Well done. I'm going to ask you to continue to stand as we invite Mrs. Natasha Williamson, Administrative Assistant here at the University, to open us up in prayer.
Good evening, all. Shall we bow our heads in prayer? Father, as we come to you today, thanking you for life, health, and strength, we thank you for the blessings of today and for your provision, for your sustenance, for your leadership and guidance. Father, I want to thank you for causing us as a nation to prosper over these 49 plus years as an independent nation. Truly, we can say that the Lord has blessed this nation, and you have caused us to prosper in many ways. Yet, Father, we are perplexed about the level of crime and criminal activities in our land. Too many families are being destroyed and ripped apart by crime. There are more people in our land who are law-abiding than those who are not. And so, Father, at this meeting of the Government and Public Policy Institute's meeting, where the Minister of National Security for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas is the guest speaker, I ask that you speak through the Honorable Minister on the way forward for our country regarding law and order. Father, as he speaks, let his words be clear and concise. Let his words give solutions to problems and clear methodologies to systems so that all islands of the Bahamas are peaceful and safe. I pray for unity among our uniformed branches. Because of them all working together, they keep us safe from day to day, and for this we say thank you. Your word admonishes us to ask anything in your will, and that you will hear us. Therefore, I pray for the spirit of love and forgiveness to overshadow our land. I pray that you will help us to live in unity. Help us as citizens to be law-abiding and to do our part in building a better nation, recognizing that what we do today affects the next 3 or 4 generations. We pray for your wisdom. We pray for your guidance. We pray for your provision and your protection over this archipelago of islands. These things we ask in Jesus' mighty name, and all of the people of God say, amen.
Thank you. You may be seated. Now, y'all are quite disciplined, and that's wonderful. But I want you to turn to somebody and tell them, say, you know what, you look good. Now, just so their hair don't get swell up, tell them, say, yeah, but I look better. We at the university are led by a distinguished president and CEO, and we are delighted that he has been able to join us tonight, notwithstanding his very busy schedule. And so, ladies and gentlemen, please, to welcome you, I ask you to put your hands together and welcome Dr. Eric Rowland.
Good evening, everyone. Greetings to all, and welcome to the University of the Bahamas. Is this the first time for any of you here? In this? No, nobody? Everybody's been here before? That's what I like to see. Really devoted fans. Thank you. I appreciate that. I stand upon a protocol already having been established, but I still wish to recognize the Honorable Minister Wayne Munro, KC, and Minister of National Security, other government ministers, permanent secretaries, other leaders, CEOs, those of you in beautiful uniforms, and the rest of you in your work uniform like me. I want to welcome all of you here, Administrative Council and all of our members, and I want to say particularly great thanks, and I'm forever indebted to Mr. Shivargo Lang and the Public Policy Institute here for putting together these useful conversations. This is what's going to move everybody forward, so I'm really happy to have this here. Welcome to those of you who are out there on Facebook and joining us live there, the local media. Thank you for being here. The topic of our discussion tonight is a timely one, entitled Government's National Security Strategy for Maintaining Law and Order and Providing Security Within the Bahamas. I'm very pleased also and honored that the University of Bahamas is thought of to be and invited to be a significant partner with the government to steer lecture series of importance to bring awareness to this forum, and bring awareness via this forum to the Bahamians, that all will have an impact on our country through our Public Policy Institute and otherwise. We know that the government of Bahamas is very committed to fighting societal issues, crime, lawlessness, with a view of providing security for its citizens, its residents, and visitors. And as usual, we are in a precarious international situation now that we haven't been in for years. I'll have to say that I started my own career by being one of those guards outside the door. That's a long, long time ago, and the world was different. the world has changed, both in some ways internally, right, as we know here in the Bahamas, but also globally. And the process of making this better starts with us as citizens, really, and we know that. We have a role to play in order to support the government with its strategies to ensure law and order and to ensure the maintenance of law and order. And like I always tell my colleagues here, if you see something, speak up. The police and the people in uniform are really our friends. But anyway, by becoming a concerned citizen member in the building of the Bahamas, we at the university will deepen our relationship with the government. We will manifest our commitment to our country via our involvement in national development through teaching, research, innovation, and service to society. And I'm really happy even to chit-chat with Minister Munro even before we start about such issues, and I really am truly grateful for all the support we have in these issues, so thank you. So with the national goal as our guide, we are committed to increasing our research capacities at all levels, across all disciplines, whether it's political, scientific, social, environmental, artistic, cultural. We must ensure that we produce and will provide collaborative impact towards understanding and solving challenges to facilitate the nation's continued growth. The holistic approach will lead to the creation of effective social guidelines that support the government's plan, along with entrepreneurial opportunities that help stimulate and sustain economic development throughout our country. It is a well-established fact, and a fact that I really had to live through back in 2011, that when people have meaningful work and income, lawlessness and crime goes down. In 2011, I switched jobs and I moved to a different region of California at the time, and there was 25% unemployment in that region at the time. There were no restaurants open, there were no coffee shops, and I can just say, even though I had a job, I didn't even want to be there like everybody else, because people didn't have jobs, and when people don't have jobs, then you're going to have other problems, and we're all not going to like it. So I just want to stress that we're all working for something good together in keeping and defending the law and the peace in the country. So tonight's discussion on the national security policy should bring focus to the to the government's procedures and the progress that they have made and our national agencies have made. It's a good time for us to come together, to listen, to really get involved with these concerns, understand them, and really have an open dialogue in terms of where our improvements are needed. And that's what we intend to do, as always, through our GPPI here at the Public Policy Institute. As the university expands its higher learning curriculum, we must support the government by enhancing our degree programs for graduate students at the master's and PhD levels. We are doing that. We have built a lot of new degrees just in the last year. These advanced degrees are advantageous in preparing Bahamian graduates to become professional entrepreneurs, politicians, and problem solvers for the future, because that's what we need. We need more problem solvers. And it's really in this context that it's my esteemed pleasure to welcome you to this most important lecture, as was said by Mr. Lang, given by the Honorable Wayne Munro, our Minister of Social Security. So thank you and welcome, and let's all listen to the Minister and the messages in terms of our policies and things we are doing to improve the conditions for all. Thank you.
If the Minister of National Security don't get national security right, we can need a Minister of Social Security in him. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor of leading a team of people who make it possible to do the kinds of things we are now doing, and they are here tonight. We have a Senior Policy Fellow, Dr. Ivor Dahl, here with us tonight. Dr. Marcellus Taylor is here, Senior Policy Fellow. Leslie Archer, and the lady who has been coordinating this for a little while, Jeannie Gibson, our policy assistant, is also here in the room. And they make these things happen. And so I just want you to put your hands together and give them a round of applause. Of course, then we have an executive assistant who makes all of us work, and she's not here tonight, but she can't tell Hall Briggs. But I want to call now on our policy fellow, Leslie Archer, to come and to present our speaker for tonight.
Good evening, everyone. Prior to being elected to Parliament, Wayne Roosevelt Monroe operated as principal in the firm of Monroe and Associates, and he's a noted civil litigator. He's known for his innovative approach to litigation and is sought after for complex and groundbreaking cases. He's also known to excel in cases of first impression and has appeared in all courts of the Bahamas, including the Judicial Committee of Her Majesty's Privy Council, which serves as the final appellate court for the Bahamas. He is a member of the Bar of England and Wales, having been admitted as a member of the Utter Bar of the Honourable Society of the Inner Temple in July 1990. And he is also a member of the Bahamas Bar, having been admitted in August 1990. He was appointed as Her Majesty's Counsel, learned in the law by letters patent, on the 8th day of January 2015. He has served the Bahamas in a judicial capacity, having been appointed and acted as a stipendary and circuit magistrate. And he has also served as an acting justice of the Supreme Court of the Bahamas. He has served as president of the Bahamas Bar Association and chairman of the Bahamas Bar Council from 2003 to 2009. He is currently a member of the Bahamas Bar Council, and he is also a member of the Organization of Commonwealth Caribbean Bar Association. Mr. Monroe was appointed an associate tutor in advocacy by the Council of Legal Education for the West Indies in 2000 and still holds that appointment today. He tutors advocacy at the Council's Eugene Depute Law School, situated in New Providence, the Bahamas. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to welcome the Honorable Wayne Monroe, Minister of National Security, as he presents on the topic, National Security, Maintaining Law and Order.
Thank you. Please be seated. Shivago, you know, the trick to having a big audience of uniformed people is it's promotion time. All fun and jokes aside, though, if I may recognize and supplement the protocol in recognizing Mrs. Cheryl Darville, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of National Security, Commodore Dr. Raymond King, Commodore of the Defense Force, and Captain Shondell Pinder, his deputy. He attends along with his beautiful wife. Mr. Dawn Clare, the Acting Commissioner of Corrections. I think I saw the Deputy Commissioner of Corrections. Ms. Bernadette Murray Thompson. I see Assistant Commissioner of Police, Shivago Dames from the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. Police Force, sorry. You were made a police, I made you a Defense Force officer. Tellis Bethel, retired Commodore, who is the Standard Inspectorate of the Law Enforcement Services. And to all other distinguished guests, faculty, and persons viewing. I'll begin in this way. Proverbs 22, verses 1 through 6, goes as follows. A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver and gold. The rich and poor meet together. The Lord is the maker of them all. A prudent man foreseeth the evil, and hideth himself. But the simple pass on and are punished. By humility and fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life. Thorns and snares are in the way of the forward. He that keep his soul shall be far from them. and verse 6, which was the theme for my school, Kingsway Academy. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. I will start there, and at the end of this, I will return to this. And do forgive me, Carlos Reed, and not recognizing Carlos Reed, a consultant to the Minister of National Security. This subject is wider than local law and safety, so let me read in your hearing what is the national security policy for the government of the Bahamas. And it is that this administration will take all necessary and appropriate steps to, 1, preserve and protect the safety, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and hence guard our heritage against national and transnational criminal threats which seek to threaten the safety of the citizens and persons residing in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and weaken the institution of governance and subsequently the political, economic, and social stability that citizens, residents, and visitors enjoy. To ensure that the judiciary and other organizations responsible for governance, and particularly the law enforcement agencies and military responsible for defense, peace, and security within the Commonwealth of the Bahamas are equipped with necessary resources and advanced technology, are manned with adequate human capital, and are professionally trained and developed to fulfill its role and functions. Through collaborative, coordinated, and cooperative operations between national law enforcement agencies and regional partners, partner nations, ensure that our maritime borders are controlled and protected to effectively counter illicit drug trafficking, weapon smuggling, illegal migration, trafficking in persons, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, and other threats to the Bahamas or its regional neighbors. The aforementioned measures will be geared towards citizenry security and safer community via reduced domestic crime, by preventing, dissuading, deterring, or detaining criminal elements. For the rehabilitation and reintegration of offenders to society as community leaders and builders, and finally, implementing Vision 2040, the National Development Plan. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the national security policy of the Bahamas adopted by the cabinet of this Davis-Cooper administration. I hope that you will see through this presentation, although we will not look deeply at domain awareness and security, which is provided by the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, as the greatest concern with safety in this country is domestically. Just this morning, we had an incident in which one of our ceasefire units, in signaling a vehicle to stop, the occupants opened fire on that patrol vehicle with a weapon that fired a 7.62 round. That's an assault rifle. And proceeded to injure a police officer on duty and make good an escape. The offenders, the suspects, are in custody. But just so that you can understand the full breadth of what we will traverse today, this afternoon, I returned a call from an irate female citizen who complained that the police broke into her house in Ridgeland Park, where the arrests were made of the suspects. And while she was sleeping naked, broke in. She didn't like the experience. She didn't know why they came with all the guns. Just to be explained that it may well have been a legitimate mistake in the pursuit of culprits who had just shot at the police with an assault rifle, occasioning all of the arms that the officers entered her house with. And as a private citizen, what ought to be the response to that? And so every day it seems that we have these instances. And so as we gather here today, we must recognize that our citizens' safety and security and well-being remain the cornerstone of our great nation's prosperity. We as a government understand that the economic growth and job creation we all strive for can only be achieved if there's a drastic reduction in crime and the establishment of peaceful and orderly society. For many, the fear of crime is more compelling than the actual numbers. For the headline crime of murder, the statistics last year from the police suggested 40% was directed at a class of persons who were on bail being monitored as the suspects and defendants in serious criminal matters. Unfortunately, there were a number of collateral damages related to killings in that class. But for many, the fear of that crime is more compelling than the actual crime that impacts more persons than any other, namely sexual offenses and armed robbery. So the fear of crime sometimes is more compelling than the actual statistics of crime. Undoubtedly, though, there's been an escalation in violent crimes in the Bahamas as in the other countries in this region and the world. And as a response, there goes out a cry for drastic action. Everyone expects the Minister of National Security to solve crime by drastic policy. There is a cry for the carrying out of capital punishment. There's a cry for increased sentences and for remand without bail for all charged with serious offenses without exception. The efficacy of these proposed efforts I advance very passionately without any attempt to underpin them or justify them with actual measurable metrics or facts. We just say it. The facts will show that in my time in practice, which isn't very long, from 1990 to today, sentences have steadily increased in severity, but there's been no corresponding decrease in the incidence of violent crime, none whatsoever. So we keep increasing sentences, and crime keeps increasing along with it. We speak about capital punishment. The 40% of the murders committed last year appears to be evidence of capital punishment being executed on the streets without trial, without due process, and without appeals. Yet young men continue to join the street gangs, seemingly undeterred by an almost promise of death on the street. And so the Ministry of National Security is committed to taking steps and implementing and supporting policies to reduce crime and protect the Bahamian people. It is our top priority, and it will always remain at the forefront of our agenda. We're cognizant that our responsibility extends beyond the government to involve the engagement of all stakeholders, from law enforcement agencies and local communities to the private sector and civil society. As the Minister of National Security, I'm guided by the Blueprint for Change, our manifesto that committed us to implement the National Development Plan Vision 2040. And as you have heard read in your presence, the national security policy of this government expressly commits to the implementation of Vision 2040. This development plan was as a result of a loan funding from the IDB. It was collective, it was bipartisan, it was truly a national effort informed by participation from all sectors of the society and undergirded, and I repeat, undergirded by evidence and research, factual things. This plan contains a comprehensive approach to attaining the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. While the Honorable Prime Minister Philip Edward Brave Davis, KCMP, in his inaugural address for this term, indicated that he is open to an informed, reasoned treatment and treating with this plan because of the adopted national security policy. I am of the considered opinion, and in fact directed by the Cabinet decision, to go about implementing Vision 20 insofar as it relates to national security, unless, of course, there can be a reasoned explanation for why there should be departure from the strategies. To realize the vision set out in this development plan, we are committed to investing in developing our law enforcement infrastructure, modernizing our approach to policing, promoting community engagement, and strengthening our criminal justice system. We firmly believe that by working collaboratively, we can create an environment that nurtures social and economic progress while preserving the unique cultural heritage of our beautiful country. I want to express my gratitude to the University of the Bahamas for hosting this event and facilitating this critical dialogue on our national security policy. And how I see it working, Mr. President and Mr. Lang, I set it out. No doubt your researchers will seek to see whether what I'm saying makes any sense. And if you're able to debunk it, of course, you can invite me back for a debate over what you say ought to change. After all, it is all of our country collectively, and only a fool believes he knows everything. I'd like to, though, emphasize the approach we take to addressing domestic crime. And it's simply this, it's fourfold. The first is prevention. Recently, I've been describing criminality as a road, as a journey, and I'd like to continue that analogy, that metaphor here. We were all innocent once at birth. We were all innocent, and then it goes downhill from there. As we march towards our death, because every second you're alive, you're a second closer to death, which we must all recognize. As we move down the road from innocence at birth, somewhere along the road, some of our citizens, first they develop crisis, they're at risk, and then they have issues, and at some point, they become involved in serious crime. The young man who fired out of the back window of the little Japanese car this morning at people they knew to be police officers in a police car did not arrive at that point this morning. There was a journey from the innocence of their birth, when they were truly their mother's good sons, to the point of this morning where only their mother would describe them as her good son in those circumstances. So that is a journey to the point of criminality. And so the first step is prevention. And our primary goal is to prevent crime by intervening with at-risk youth before they turn to criminal activities in earnest. We have gangs in this country. if we don't get them to join our gang, I can assure you that there are a number of other gangs that will very readily accept them. And so to achieve this, we have reinvigorated and in some cases implemented a range of programs and initiatives to empower our young people, providing them with the tools and support they need to make positive life choices. These initiatives include, but are not limited to, the program called Students Together Against Negative Decisions, STAND, the Berry Island Community Plan, Law Enforcement Empowerment and Preparedness Program, and Urban Renewal 2.0, put on by the Royal Bahamas Police Force. The Defense Force has a National Youth Development Office whose sole focus is intervention programs with the youth. And the most notable thing we may know them for is the Rangers program that is spread across islands in this Commonwealth and is not limited to New Providence. And so even at the level of the military here, everyone is recognizing that we have to engage with our young people. By investing in these programs, we're actively working to address the root causes of crime and violence and foster a safe and more secure society for all. So that's the first step on this road. Either we will interrupt their march to criminality and prevent it, or we won't. That is the reality. If we do not arrest their march to criminality, then the next task is to detect them, arrest them, and disrupt their criminal behavior. And we understand the critical role of law enforcement in maintaining public safety. As such, my job is not to be a policeman. We have a lot of qualified law enforcement professionals to carry out that function. My job and the job of politicians are to provide policy guidance in terms of allocation of resources and to provide and make decisions. One that I would immediately can demonstrate from recent events. There's a big issue now that's brought into focus about fire preparedness on our family islands. When we came to office, the then commissioner made an urgent request to recruit and train 50 persons to join the fire branch of the Royal Bahamas Police Force because their numbers were depleted. And so it may not be a surprise to you that we do not have fire branch officers on every island of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas simply because we lack the manpower resources for that. That has to be a policy decision as to how many men you pay to recruit, and then an operational decision by the commissioner and his senior executive leadership team as to where they deploy their manpower. So this is the nature of decision making, and we are committed to provide the resources. And so we've increased enlistment in the Royal Bahamas Defense Force and the Royal Bahamas Police Force and the Bahamas Department of Corrections. We've purchased additional vehicles for us, the saturation patrols the police wish to carry out. And it was one of the new patrol vehicles that was fired upon last night. As the police become ever present, the chances of them interdicting, detecting persons in the commission of crime, before the commission of crime or shortly after, is heightened. We all heard about the armed robbery of Superwash Carmichael, the immediate presence of the police, and the apprehension of the 3 armed robbers in short time thereafter. And so we've committed to upping the resources. there's an implementation of specialized task forces and units, like the Anti-Gang and Firearms Task Force, which is to address gang activity in the Bahamas and firearms trafficking. This is a multi-agency task force. It contains a member from all of the what we call Honlia agencies. That's the Defense Force, the police, customs, immigration, Commissioner, I forgot it, and corrections, along with our foreign partners. We cannot operate in silos. One of the most important developments in specialized units is the new Sexual Offenses Domestic Violence Unit that is seeking to make a one-stop experience an opportunity for victims of sexual violence to have a seamless route to reporting these offenses. I was a little bit disappointed when I learned that there's some hang-up in actually outfitting the building that is set for them to operate. I got that information, and between myself and the PS, we will solve that problem, because that is actually one of the only things the Minister of National Security is set and tasked to do. And so, since assuming office, I'm pleased to say that the policy directions in something like the Sexual Offenses Unit involve someone at my level, with my experience, directing the police that confronting the victims of sexual offenses with the accused man has no evidential value at all and ought to be discontinued. That's the only input that a policymaker ought to have on operational matters. But we hope very shortly to be able to open a center where a victim of sexual violence can come, know that, or domestic violence can come, know that they're not going to be directed anywhere else, know that they're going to meet persons trained to properly receive their complaint, and for that matter, for there to be office spaces for the NGOs who deal with victim support. All of that is an important step of increasing, which will, and I would warn you, may well increase the numbers of reported sexual offenses, because sexual offenses are a unique type of offense where the amount of it depends on how much is reported. And we need not be afraid about the statistics and get concerned with managing statistics. We need to be concerned about identifying and addressing that sort of deviant behavior in our country. And so that is an initiative by the current Commissioner of Police when attaining office, and we hope to see it realized very shortly. We aim to ensure that our law enforcement agencies are equipped to respond rapidly and efficiently to criminal activities, safeguarding the well-being of our citizens. So, you've decided not to be law-abiding. We've caught you. Now what? Further down the road in the process is trial. We have an experience today, and the police tell me every day, 40% of the murders last year were of people on bail for, many of them, murder. I believe one of the recent persons murdered was on bail for 6 murders, which would stand testament that for 6 murders, none of them have come to trial. And so we have to address the trial process. And we recognize that a fair, efficient judicial system is essential to maintaining public trust in our institutions. And as such, we're in the process of setting up a task force to address delay reductions. The introduction showed I acted as a judge, a magistrate and a judge. When I acted as a judge, I sat in the criminal division, presiding over criminal trials. I was told I was the second most efficient judge for case disposal. I sat for 3 months. The judge who disposed of more matters than me sat for 12 months. And so I hope to, in the round, I know that it can be done. It is simply a matter of approaching it properly. And the current Chief Justice has agreed that we will bring together all of the stakeholders to solve and cut the knot that backs up trials. Just think about this. Every judge gets 5 months of vacation a year. There are 10 judges assigned to the criminal division of the Supreme Court. So you have 50 weeks of vacation across the 10 judges sitting in the criminal division. And while they're on vacation, currently, nobody sits in their courts. And so if we are able to arrange a system as they do in the UK, where King's Counsel sit when they're on vacation, you have the creation of 50 weeks of trial time without appointing one additional substantive judge. And so it is efforts like these that we hope to explore to speed up the trial process. Additionally, and some people say it's ironically, sitting where I now sit, I am a great advocate for a denial of bail. And I can do so with great vim and vigor and gusto, because I bring to the table all that I would have been doing when I was advocating for bail. And so I have the dubious distinction of being the first person in the Turks and Caicos Islands, when I did a case down there, to get somebody admitted to bail for murder in the Turks and Caicos. They don't have the death penalty down there, but it was still a first. And it's a very simple proposition that I advance. Whether you are innocent or guilty, it is clear from the statistics, when we have 40% of the murders last year being persons on bail for murder, that if you are charged with murder and admitted to bail, there's a high probability that you can be killed. And as a matter of public safety, that the bail should be refused because you are likely to be killed in an urban setting. We had someone on bail shot at a farmer's market, on a bus. We had the collateral damage of, I think it was a 6-year-old child, killed by gunfire intended for somebody on bail for murder. And so whether or not, we don't have to get caught up on the presumption of innocence. You're presumed innocent, but your release creates a danger not only to you, but to the general public. We're waiting patiently to see what the courts will make of that argument. And certainly the commissioner is very ardent with the fact that if you are admitted to bail and you breach your bail conditions, the other commissioner, the Commissioner of Corrections, has somewhere that we can put you, so that we are very sure that you will do what you are told. And so we must make the trial process fair, efficient, and open. So we've gone down the road now further, and you've been adjudged guilty, because that's an outcome that is possible. That's not the end of it. All of the cries about increasing sentences, about the death penalty, really are about the fact that when we have criminals in our midst, we really want to just put them away so we don't have to deal with them anymore. That's the reality, if we are honest with ourselves. But Commissioner Clare will tell you, 98.5% of the residents of the correctional facility will be released. 98.5% of them you will see again. Even if they are sentenced to 40 years for murder, they will come back out. And so it's important as a matter for public safety that we deal with rehabilitation. And the Prime Minister makes the point to me that his two favorite parts of this is prevention and rehabilitation. He'll tell you it's like this, and there's no call it sign or anything, it's prevention and rehabilitation. And so our approach to national security extends beyond prevention and enforcement and includes the rehabilitation of offenders. We're dedicated to transforming the Bahamas Department of Correctional Services. Well, let me say it as Commissioner Clare and Deputy Commissioner Murray would say. We're really committed to having a correctional facility because we don't have one now. And it's a very serious matter. We do not have a correctional facility. When I came back from England in 1990, the joke that we used to have is that we used to say you're catching the free ride at 5. The bus to the prison left at 5. You know, all that speeding through rush hour traffic. Now I tell Claire to stop that so I can be popular, you know. Take the people back at 7 o'clock because they have no social life. They don't have no appointments to make. They can take them back whatever time they like. They can bring them out whatever time they like. They have no social calendar. Claire's still promising me to deliver on that one. I think I'll be very popular if you do, Commissioner Clare. But your free ride at 5, if those of you who can remember it, was on a school bus. There was a big yellow school bus that took you to prison. And we would all sit down and say, these people are truly being taken to school. The problem is, what were they being schooled in? And you know, as Bahamians, we can be very cruel and unchristian. And we would say, oh, you go into prison and you can get raped and all the rest of this. Well, that's a foolish thing to say, because if somebody is raped in prison, you ever think what they might want to do when they come out of prison? Because they are going to come out of prison. And so we have this attitude. And I am persuaded, from my personal experience, that young men that I saw go up to prison for very simple things, sometimes being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Carlos could tell you, a couple of them now are gang leaders and very terrible fellas. When they went into prison as young men for very small things. And let me explain how it happens, because I think the ASP from the anti-gang unit was caught explaining it. I'm a gang leader. I'm in prison. You're a young boy. You come to prison. You're going to be there for about 6 or 9 months. You're afraid that you're going to get raped in prison. I make sure that nobody troubles you. Back in the day, I make sure people put water on the gate for you, food on the gate for you. When I get my marijuana smuggling clear, I give you some. I basically look after you because I know you're going to touch the road well before I touch the road. And when you touch the road, you have to be grateful for me. Why? Because just human decency would cause you to be grateful for someone who stopped anyone raping you. That's just the one thing a lot of men are afraid of, who looked after you in prison. And what's more, you have no reason to believe that you mightn't be back in prison. And so by that method, the state of our prison itself created criminals. And we all who have been involved in the process know it. And so Vision 2040 made it plain. The state must be responsible for your safety in prison so that you don't owe it to any gang leader for your safety. The state must provide clean water for you so that you don't have to rely on a gang member for clean water. And we are moving towards this by seeking to construct a new correctional facility. We are moving towards this by training our correctional officers to a point of being certified as correctional officers. The only punishment, and I repeat, the only punishment when I was a judge and sentenced you to 15 years, the only punishment I was imposing on you was that you lose your freedom for 15 years. And that was it. And so we're moving to make that the case. We are also moving towards focusing on inmate industries. People must have something productive to do when they come out of prison. The worst thing you can do is have a convict come out of prison broke, no money. What exactly, and no money, unlikely to get a job because he has a criminal record, having lost likely his home, his family. What exactly would you expect that person to do? And so we're moving to change that paradigm. Let me just bounce quickly back because I want to focus for a minute on one program that we've seen fit to develop. And this is important for me for this purpose. When I was first in practice, I represented a government high student who nearly decapitated another government high student. So don't get me wrong. We've always had minors committing murder. I've represented a number in my time. But the movement towards the reduction in age of not murderers in terms of getting a fight with a cutlass, murderers in terms of hit men, is troubling to the extent that we must address our intervention programs at an earlier age. And I want to put for your consideration, and Brother Lang, this is one that the university can research because it's being piloted now. It's being piloted with the leadership of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force Youth Development Office. And it's a program that you may have been seeing and will see called a HYPE program. The anachronism is helping young people excel, because that is what we must do. It's a multi-agency program. We have involvement of the Ministry of Education, who identify the students who can benefit from it. Their guidance counselors work along with the program. We engage and pay, because you have to pay teachers to work after hours, teachers to give students additional help in numeracy and literacy, because the research tells us that young people who aren't achieving are more likely to be criminal than those who are. And so we need to help them with that, and the Ministry of Education teachers are paid to deliver the extra numeracy and literacy. The anti-drug section of the Ministry of Health deliver the Aspire curriculum that deals with conflict resolution, etiquette, and basically how to be a decent human being. And of course, since we all could use some discipline, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, the Royal Bahamas Police Force, the Bahamas Department of Corrections provides a discipline component. To teach, I think Lieutenant Commander Duncombe tells me very simple things that the military teaches you: to have your shoes shine and clean all the time, to have your shirt clean, no dirt in the collar all the time, which requires you to be disciplined in how you think and how you act. And so that is a program that is being introduced in the primary schools because we need to intervene earlier. We have introduced a testing system as we follow them to be able to say, by measurable metrics, is this effective or not? And so there is room in all of this for engagement with the public, with the universities, and with the wider society. Now, I can skip over a lot of this, right? Because this looked kind of boring to start with. And I want to get to talk about something that really is a passion for mine, and that is this. We have to decide, right? We say it takes a village to raise a child. And let me tell you all something, because I've seen it on a number of occasions. There was a brilliant young man in Camp Road, 4.0 student, 4.0, best student at his university. Mother has done every possible thing that she was supposed to do to raise a decent son. And he was murdered just when he was about to get his big job in an accounting firm, able to look after his mother and brother, arranging for her to come over to be with him because he'd be making real money. And he was killed by someone who clearly wasn't quite raised right. So we need to reflect on that. And I'm led by the Spirit to say all of the rest of this thing about technology, yeah, all of that is nice. That's how we catch you, right? We've already moved away from electric shock treatment as treatment. So the technology is nice insofar that it helps us to catch you. But you know, given time, I want to go back to how I started, and that's Proverbs. Train up a child in the way he should go. Now that's all our responsibility, and it ain't only talking about your child, because you could train up your child in the way he should go, and he would not depart from it, but he could be struck down by a child who is not trained up correctly. And so it truly takes a village to raise all of the children, not just ours. And so what I want to ask us and challenge us is this. I've challenged Johnson and the PR people in the ministry that we want to come up with a check the box just to see what sort of a part you are playing. So let me ask all of us some questions. And this may harken back, and those of you of my vintage and beyond would recognize this right away, because this is what used to happen. I said, we're on our road to 50. And remember I said we went from whether the police should have guns to now all the police having guns all the time. And now by all accounts, some of the police having assault weapons and more of them having assault weapons in their patrol vehicles than before. So you see the trend that we are on. And it never used to be like that when I was a boy. And I'm only 55. I know that's old, but that's not that old. So it's in our lifetime. And so let us ask ourselves some questions. When I see a child misbehaving, do I inform his or her parent? Yes. That's an easy one, eh? Everyone should be able to check that box. But can we all check that box? Back in the day, that was clear. In fact, when we used to misbehave back in the day, you used to hope that nobody see you and tell your parents. So do we do that? Next box. When I see a child misbehaving, do I approach the child and correct the child? That's a little bit more active now, right? Yeah. when I suspect a child is the victim of abuse, and I could add, if I suspect anyone is a victim of abuse, do I make it my business to intervene and seek to get help? Or do I just watch? Because Dr. David Allen has a study where he says that hurt people end up hurting other people. So do I really care to become involved to just help somebody who might be being abused? Am I actively involved in mentoring a child? And that could be anything. It could be you in a youth ministry at your church. It doesn't have to be a formalized education. Do I take time to mentor a child? Or am I just concerned with my child? That's really the question. And then, am I actively involved in providing advice and assistance to that parent who I could see is struggling in raising the children? You know, the women we see cussing and carrying on at the children, where you could see this woman ain't handling it, this fella ain't handling it. Or do we just sit back and watch children subject to bad parenting without any attempt to intervene? Because we could stay in our corner and raise our good children who can be struck down by those very children who you permit to be parented like that. Am I a member of a group or organization that engages in civic work to support and enable children or their parents? So even if you don't have the courage to do it yourself, because some of us are introverted, am I a support mechanism for an organization that is doing it? So I'm not bold enough to be, to do what Mrs. Christie and those at the Crisis Center do, because I don't have the skill or ability. Well, do you support them? Do you even know if they need a 5-gallon bottle of water? Do you ask? Do you check? You're not doing it. The people who are doing it, do you make it your business to see if you can support the people who are doing these things? And are you a member of such a group? You know, I've had to give a date to my lodge as to when I'm going to go with them to their Boys of Excellence Club with the young boys at Gerald Cash Primary School on a Friday during lunch. Not a big deal, but you do not know what it's going to mean to the young person. And a very simple one, and I hope if we cannot say this now, we will all be able to say this by the end of tomorrow. Do I encourage young people? Very simple thing can increase a young person's self-esteem. A very simple word. If you see a young man who's trying, give him an encouraging word. Do we even do that? So all of these are things that we can do. Because, you know, we always say if you're not a part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Well, let's be more charitable than that. There's a saying that's wrongly attributable to Edmund Burke, where it says, for evil men to triumph, it only takes good people to do nothing. That's all. So for evil to continue to triumph in this country, all it takes is those of us who are good to not become involved in being a part of the solution. And as the Minister of National Security, yeah, I'm putting it on y'all, because that's putting it on me. We're not going to be able to lock these problems away. We have to address it. We have to deal with it. And it is very manageable. All we need to do is everyone reach one. And they can become a part of our gang. And I'll tell you something I learned in my church at Camp Road. It's very easy to compete with Tiger Nation, Crack Nation, Mad Ass, Dirty South, all of that. All of these young men just looking for an identity and looking to be a part of a group that values them. The sad thing about this country is that we don't value them enough, it seems, to get them to stay interested in being a part of us. And that is a challenge that only we, the people, can answer. And so that's what I would have to say on this. It would take a completely different topic for us to talk about territorial integrity and all the rest of that. But I'm happy to say that all of our uniform branches participate in the outreach to young people, and they're all to be commended for that.
So let me set the context of question and answer period. Let me say, my colleague, former member of Parliament and Cabinet Minister Loretta Butler Turner. It's a pleasure to see you, ma'am. Good to have you here. Let me tell you this, and I'm saying this very seriously. That is one of the best told national security policy presentations I have ever had. We like to say that truly public policy is a story. It's a story of a problem and the way you work through the problem. And we have had a very wonderfully understandable story told of this administration's approach to a national security policy. That's a great start for a discussion. The minister said something in the latter part of his presentation about you never know what your word to a young person could mean. So this morning, when I sat in the airport to come here, I was sitting on the side of a person, and the lady leans over to me and she says, "Mr. Lang, you don't know me, but when I was at St. John's College, you made a presentation to us." She said, and I'll never forget what you said. You said, you know, you had a piece of paper with where you wanted to go and where you were and how you were going to get there. And that whatever was not a part of that process, you did not participate in. She says, and I never forget it. She says, and guess what? I was in Grand Bahama making a presentation, and on my way to make the presentation, I remembered what you said to me, and here you are sitting on the side of me. You just never know. So we're going to allow you to ask questions today, and I want to explain the rules. It's the same rules for every single, and I'm so glad we have all these uniformed people in here today, and the Minister of National Security. Please keep your commentary to a minimum and your questions to the maximum so we can get the most people in to ask their questions. And please let us be as orderly as we can in the conduct thereof. So if you're going to ask a question, you're going to go to the mic right there. I'm going to that mic right there. So if you see me pulling your coat, don't fight me. I can call the police. And then the minister will be able to attend your question. Minister?
Okay, so hi, my name is Natino Thompson. You talk about the criminal elements or threats which undermine from without. But what about the criminal elements or threats that occur because of institutional abuses, institutional gaps, institutional policies and practices that undermine? And I say that because you mentioned that it created. So my theory is that the Bahamian states actively creates criminal and stateless people in the Bahamas because of the institutional gaps that we fail to recognize, right? For example, you talk about the Camp Road person, right? One of the gaps that would have been failed to realize to prevent crime would be sexual orientation. And therefore, that's a big area of concern because you can't prevent something that you're not seeing, or you have no metrics, or you're not even, it's not a part of the approach And so I'm wondering about, because you talk, from my perspective as a researcher, I can see glaring gaps in in the approach that you presented. And I disagree with most of it, although I'm impressed, kind of, sort of, right? But yeah.
Okay. Well, institutions cannot speak, human beings speak. So when people try to lay the issue off on an institution, I rebel strongly against that because I believe in personal responsibility. If you're in an institution, that institution changes depending on who directs. And so I'd give you the most classic example, the one alluded to, sexual orientation. If you have somebody who decides that what somebody else wants to be is their business, then you'll have an institutional problem. If you have somebody who decides that I am who I am, and you get to be who you are so long as you don't invade my space, and so long as I don't invade yours, you'll have a different response to it. And so institutions are manned by people. And it's not the institution that has the problem, it's the people. And so I've seen a report about the Metropolitan Police in London where they say they're racist, misogynist, all of that. Organizations aren't racist, misogynist, and that. People are. And once you make people take responsibility for their actions, then you can address the larger problem.
Good night, sir. Good night to everybody in attendance. I'm Aaron Wilson. I'm currently conducting my senior thesis. And I'm happy that you actually spoke about gangs in the Bahamas, because my thesis is the Bahamas is anti-gang law, success or failure. And when I look at the law, Penal Code Amendment Act of 2014, where they lay out what gangs are and fine and penalty in relation to being a gang member, then I look at the prosecution of gang members in the Bahamas. And from 2014 to now, it's been 0. So knowing that there's no person who's actually being brought before the courts in relation to gangs, and speaking with personnel from CIB and the anti-gang task force, they agree as well. There's been 0 prosecution of gang members in the Bahamas. So do you see it as being a success as currently drafted in the Bahamas? And in comparison to Jamaica as well as Trinidad and Tobago, should it be a standalone law where it's more comprehensive in nature?
I don't agree that having a standalone law makes 1 inch of a difference. What makes the difference is the makeup of the country and the makeup of your gangs. Part of the biggest problem with prosecuting gangs is this, when you look at how they're made up. If my gang is me, my brother, my cousin, and the rest of that, how are you going to say that we are related for a criminal purpose? Whereas in countries like Jamaica or Trinidad, where the membership of the gangs have no family affiliation, clearly relate, clearly for a purpose, that's slightly different. So you can't take a law in abstract and make a comparison. That's the problem that we've had, for instance, with our laundering laws. Laundering laws work perfectly in countries that have income tax regimes, because you tell the government, this is what I make, this is what I own. We don't have those regimes in the Bahamas. So when you find somebody in an association with 20 people, and they say, oh, we all went to Doris together, how do you prove your case? Because the burden is on the prosecution to prove their case. Nobody has been prosecuted, but a whole heap of people have been arrested and detained for 5 days for investigation. And that is the difference. And so when we compare ourselves to our neighbors, it is always important to be aware of the factual differences. So I'll give you an example. They talk about the size of our police force, and they compare it to, say, Barbados. Barbados has 1 island, 1 airport. We have, 26, 30 airports that a policeman has to be at every one. So right off the top, you need 25 more policemen to discharge that same function as you do in Barbados. So when we get engaged in these exercises, we have to understand what we are. But that is seriously what I expressed to Brother Lang when I say, when there is this issue for discussion, that's what we sit down and we discuss and we test your theories and your thesis and your propositions by things like that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good evening, my learned minister. I have to say that was a fantastic presentation. I haven't felt that way about a minister's presentation in my entire life. So I feel truly educated and informed. I have to say. So I was very pleased. The fisherman in me, and I see Commodore King over there, is dying to ask you a question about the broader national security. Because you kept it to a narrow focus, I'll keep it also to a narrow focus.
You can go ahead if that's your more burning question.
I always felt that if I was in prison, I would want to have an opportunity to work. I don't care what capacity it was. I don't care what degree of I was being paid. I said I would rather be working than locked in a cell continuously without any form of stimulation or whatever. So what are the major impediments that we have to having like a more fleshed out work program for prisoners, even the ones in high security, even throughout the different systems? Now, from my understanding, and I've seen these commentaries going on around the world, where there's organizations like Amnesty International that are very anti-prisoner work programs because they call it slavery. They call it neo-slavery. Mm-hmm. And I personally resent that because, yes, they are being paid less. Yes, they are being paid pennies to the dollar, but they're also in prison. And they are allowing themselves to develop skills and other benefits to society. They're building roads, they're cleaning streets, they're doing all these different things. What is the big impediment in the Bahamas? Why we are not moving forward with this in a more meaningful way?
Yeah, there is no impediment. And in fact, a famous sentence that is imposed in the Commonwealth is you are sentenced to prison at hard labor. Mm-hmm. Now, Commissioner Clare and the corrections officers will tell you working is a privilege in prison. Actually, a privilege that if you misbehave, they take away from you to punish you, the ability to work. So anytime that I hear people talk about prisoners sitting down and lazy, that's somebody who doesn't realize the resident of the correctional institution wants to work. Mm. The question is, you hit on one thing, are they such a security risk that they can't be permitted to? We've seen the instance here where somebody on the work scheme, which is when you're reaching the end of your sentence, you're permitted to go out to work so you can amass some money so you don't come out broke, was murdered in a retaliatory event. Well, of course, you have to be careful about things like that. But inmate industries that is on the way in a real way is a step towards that. We're going to be moving to a system of parole. Right now, we don't have a system of parole. For quick edification, what we have now is a system of the judge sentences you to 10 years for all but very limited offenses. When you reach prison, Commissioner Clairdos can take 40 months off, right off the top, 4 months a year. And your release date won't be 10 years from the date you enter. It'll be 10 years less that 40 months. And they can take it back from you if you misbehave, and there's a formal court process for that. But we're going to move to parole where you will be accountable for every day. And the difference is this: when they take those 4 months off and they release you, you could commit a crime the next day, and you never served those 4 months that you were given off. Parole says we will release you early. You are accountable for the balance of your sentence, which you serve in the community, so we can make you go to church, for instance, if we want. We can make you not drink if that's your problem. We can make you not smoke, be subject to drug testing if that's your problem. And if you don't obey the rules, you've decided that you want to spend all of your sentence in the facility. And so we'll be releasing a bill for consultation where we will be moving to that. But all of that brings into it work. I didn't accept an IDB loan facility because they told me that the work couldn't be done by prisoners, and I'm not interested in borrowing your money if you're telling me that I can't employ prisoners doing it, because the residents want to work.
Good. Thank you so much, Minister.
Minister, I applaud your vision, especially with the formation of the domestic violence unit and the commissioner's initiative. It's fantastic for Bahamian women and men everywhere. I don't really have a question, I have a plea. I refer back to your comment about, or your how you started about talking about prevention. And you kind of started the conversation almost, I feel, midway. And I'd like you to consider going even further back. The tremendous levels of child abuse that we have in our country right now. Violence against children, sexual violence, in unimaginable forms. In the last 10 years, over 4,000 children have been abused. That's the actual statistics. The truth factor, so-called by the WHO, takes that up to 98,000, which means a quarter of our population have been abused in some form or another. I would like the police to take that more seriously, Ministry of National Security in general. If we don't stem the tide of damage to our children, we can't control the gangs. We can't control the damage being done to our young men and our young women, the shame factors that grow into anger, that explode in the violence that we see. And so I'm basically saying, can we back your policy up a little bit more and really start to put a dent in the abuse of children in our country?
Well, that would be a form of violence, domestic violence. How the unit is guided and developed, I would hope and trust is really the vision of the incoming commissioner. Well, the current commissioner, sorry,
yes,
that the parameters that they operate with, that will be set by them. They're constantly receiving specialized training to operate in that area.
Yes.
I don't regard that as prevention, because the people who are, I regard any adult who sexually abuse a child as sick.
Yes.
They're not candidates for early release in the prerogative
Okay.
of mercy process that I
Alright.
chair.
Okay.
I see it as something that could only be grounded in some mental health issue.
Right.
Violence, that's debatable in terms of whether it's acceptable discipline or not. But the
Yes.
whole purpose of this freestanding unit is that its purpose is to encourage victims to be comfortable
Yes.
in reporting. Because you could get your statistics very low, you know. If you make it difficult for people to report, or you make it hassle, people won't report.
Yes.
It may sound strange, but I'm encouraged when I see numbers that reflect that we're getting more people to report what's happening to them.
But not all abuse of children is done by family. Some
Yeah.
of it, a lot of it is stranger done. And so how does that fit in? Because we have young boys being taken and basically abused in sometimes even formal settings.
Yeah.
You know, I know of cases of it over and over. I hear the story, and I know that the level of anger that takes them through leads them to the violence that we're seeing. When I think of what is out there exploding, basically.
And as I say, Dr. David Allen,
Yes.
he has done a lot of work in this area. And the issue around it, we're going to be going to a symposium that CARICOM is setting up in Trinidad, Dr. Allen, myself, the Prime Minister, about violent crime as a public health issue.
Yes.
And it focuses on that really sort of thing.
Right.
It takes time sometimes for organizations to acquaint themselves with issues, and this unit will be directed by persons who will be trained, and their function as the police is to detect offenses. And so I'm trusting that as it develops
and
and
we'll
is
support it.
specialized, that we'll have modalities
Yes.
to address that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, for your very comprehensive approach. I just wanted to let you know I had my class, Political Economy. I insisted that they come to this lecture today because I thought it was so very important, and you spoke in a broad sense about how crime is such a very multifaceted phenomenon, and inequality, we speak about inequality in our class a lot, and how inequality is one of those factors that help, there's a very intimate connection between crime and inequality. And you know, the Bahamas, based on the IDB research, we're one of the most unequal societies in this region. Our Gini coefficient, we have an economist here, it's, you know,
But you
one
want
of
to
the
hear
highest, yes.
you want to hear something shocking?
Shock me.
Most of the people charged and convicted of armed robbery are employed.
Okay,
When I came back, the vast majority of armed robbers were government workers. So I hear that, but having done criminal defense work, and when you get the social inquiry report, the people who are largely unemployed are the gangbangers. A lot of the people who come before the courts for the standard stuff, a lot of them are employed.
all right.
A lot of them declare religion as well.
Okay,
When they have to declare what their faith is, they declare religion as well. Inequality is something that might be a stressor, but if that was a reason for crime, we would have a lot more criminals than we do now, because we have a whole lot of poor people in this country, and the vast majority of them are honest.
okay. And then-
It's a matter of outlook, you see.
It is
I'm
out-
going to say something that'll be troubling for some. Back in the day, mothers didn't work and took care of big families, and they all survived on one income. We say we can't do that today. And that's something for us to consider, whether we can't do it or we choose not to do it. It's just a value.
Okay, but you know, I thank you for that. And like you said, it's about having the empirical evidence, and you said the social inquiry. This is the Ministry of National Security. Like you said, it's a collaborative approach to partner with institutions like the university to do empirical studies to see what are some of the root causes, even if you go into prison, to get an assessment of what the psychological profile of the persons who are, you know, in prison for different offenses, to see, do they have learning abilities? Is there a connection with autism and criminality? I have a personal point of view because I have a special needs child, and so I do research. Is there a connection between learning disability and criminality in the Bahamas? You know, is there opportunity for research to be done on that, and how do you collaborate?
Well, I know that there was research in the prison done by the University of the Bahamas. The conversation, and it's a deliberate government policy that the government will use the resources of the state, its tertiary institutions, for the purposes that they're created. So I was mentioning to the president that when we're setting up the psychiatric unit in the prison, Dr. Nelson Clark, who is going to tell us what we need, says they have a bunch of psychologists, BAs, they now need them with masters, and so we're going to engage in that conversation. I have said that it is not just limited to studies of that sort. So for instance, along the lines of special needs, because I have a special needs child, that we all had the joke about the little boys who were tied up together, and they blamed the other little boy. And everyone, I forgot his name, but his name rang out for a while. They all blamed him. And it turned out that he was autistic and nonverbal. And so the two, for want of a better word, regularly able children constantly blamed him. And so we have other issues in relation to matters like that we take seriously in having to address. We need to look at how do we train our first responders to coming on a scene and meeting someone on the spectrum, because what they would otherwise class as hostile behavior may not be hostile behavior at all in the circumstances. And so these are the realities that we live and work in, and wherever it arises, we are mandated to have regard and to make use of our tertiary institutions. UB, I think the Defense Force is looking at UB to assist with some things. It is important to understand that we are now in the we're not a banana republic, as people like to say. We're an organized, advanced country for 50. We just don't understand how far we have come in 50 years compared to some other countries. Okay. And so, yes, there is availability for that type of study. And I did have a meeting with the Social Services Division of UB over matters that they can assist with.
Okay, thank you.
Minister, the UP has already done a study on that as part of its publishing book.
Yeah, on the prison. Yeah, yeah.
I might note, just to the point too of poverty and crime, that the research actually suggests that they are not really correlated.
Yeah.
That in fact what you have is you have what they call crimes of opportunity, so that the more your society prospers and your economy flourishes, more people inclined to take advantage of that opportunity come forward. And so if in fact poverty was the reason for crime, our family island should have more crimes. So should Grand Bahama, which has been in a state of recession, depression for almost 20 plus years now. And its crime rate has not comparably risen relative to its population. So what we see most often is not an economic-driven criminal activity, but something else, for sure. And in New Providence, the opportunity flourishes even more because this is the center of your economic activity. Yes. Now let me get this one person who hasn't gone yet. You go.
Good evening to all. I'm a student here, Alan J. Bain. Minister, very pleasant presentation. As I listened to all of the positive points, I really appreciate what you mentioned in dealing with the prison, all right, and dealing with all of the unnecessaries versus the necessaries in that institution. One thing that I could recommend, and I always say this when I'm amongst colleagues such as yourselves and others, we need to take a page out of Salinan book. I remember when Salinan was trying to formulate a national service. Everyone say, oh, we're going to war. No, we ain't going to no war. It's just a page out of his book. Because when I look at the pictures on the monitor there, I see like little children being coached by coaches. I listen carefully and attentively. I see that the different departments of government, they're liaison together. So to make it more fruitile and functionable, I do believe we should come together to form a national service, not just for the children. Because, okay, we have adults in that bracket that are these persons who, like you spoke about, committing these offenses. And I believe in the service, hey, we could educate them, we could train them, and we could use their expertise, what we train them to do.
A big part of the main problem with that is this: there's only one constitutional right that has no derogation, and that is that you can't have forced labor and servitude. Now, the concept of national service as practiced in other countries like South Korea or Israel, that's truly under the defense exception where everyone has to give this time. a concept of, and we are looking at it for the disaster corps that's going on now. I think they're in training now at the Police Training College in Grand Bahama. And I'll tell you my approach. When I was going off to university, why would I want to do national service? I have my career staked out. Why are you going to interrupt my life for a year or two? What would be the justification for that? The Bahamas doesn't have a shortage of anything that it requires to demand its citizens to do. If we were at war with Cuba, so that all men of service years had to give 2 years to the Defense Force, I could understand that. That would be an excuse for interrupting my career development. If we were going down that line, you would find most of the bright people in the Bahamas would migrate rather than suffer an interruption. But the concept of national service, if it's you either have a job, you're in school, or we could find something for you to do, people could get behind that one, because it would force you to be productive. And it would give you opportunity. But again, to craft it correctly so that it doesn't offend Article 14 would be the challenge. I can tell you that. Because, for instance, some people just, their conscientious belief isn't to work for the man. That's just a fact.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, this is a follow-up question because of what you said.
Yeah.
So to the point that Shivago was making, I think it has a lot to do with what you said. You were talking about in London, where they believe that institutions aren't racist, or
no. They said they found that the Metropolitan Police was
racist. And you say you don't believe in that.
Narcissistic.
Okay.
And misogynist.
Okay.
I don't personally believe that.
You said personal responsibility is what you said, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so what I want to suggest is that the numbers could be reflected. As a social scientist, I would oppose Shivago's interpretation of that, simply because it would be in line with the fact that you don't believe in institutions being racist or misogynistic or whatever. And what I'm asking then is, have you ever read Our Prisoners? Okay, well, read that, right? Read the first article done by...
You could give me the synopsis, but I'll put it to you like this. If an institution was racist, then you would have to destroy the institution, because that would remain regardless of...
And that's precisely my theory.
Regardless of what...
That's precisely the theory.
So then they would have to disband the Metropolitan Police, do away with all policemen, and replace it with what?
Well... that would be up to us to determine once we get there.
And then, and then when you put in the same people, you call the institution something different, because the same people are there, but regardless of how you design the institution.
Could I make a suggestion
the
then?
Racist people would make it racist.
So what I would suggest to you is read the first article by Dr. Ulenton and Dr. Curry about the historical implications of the prison system in the Bahamas, and then maybe you will come to a different understanding and change your mind. Can we do that? Can I get a promise on that?
I can read whatever you want, but I can tell you.
In the context of the university, the one thing that I don't have the luxury to do is interpretation. What I spoke to you about was research correlation between crime
and poverty.
And poverty. It's not Shivago's opinion.
Hi, the presentation was awesome. I didn't see, except for the students from here, I didn't see any other educators. And one thing that I've found, and one comment that you made is these are the questions. Do you do this? Do you do this? Do you do this? Right? And a lot of times when kids are in school, they're not getting any accreditation. They're not being told that they're special or they're worthy or anything like that. If they're not getting it at home and they're not getting it at school, they've got to get it from somewhere. And I find that a lot of the students fall through the cracks because we push here for academics, students, but we don't push for dexterous persons. I'm dexterous. I never did. I did horrible in school, but I can build your house.
Yeah.
You know, God said, okay, you're lousy in math, I'm going to make you a contractor. Okay, so I'm a contractor. But I think what we need to do is, the only thing that saved me in school was vocation. They had vocational subjects, carpentry and agriculture. If I didn't have those, I never would have graduated from high school. So I think if there's some way of getting the education system to realize and understand that we're not all academics, we're not all going to go to university, we're not, some of us may not even finish high school, but we can do things, right? And I think if we could spend more time doing that, you're going to have less people that are bored and more people that are going to feel like they're worthy than somebody who never ever gets an opportunity to have anybody say that they're worthy of anything or of being able to do anything, right? So that was just my 2 cents.
Well, I'll tell you this. I was very good in school, but when my car breaks down, I don't even open the hood.
Well, I can't fix your car, but I can build your
I'm
house.
clueless with anything, but there is going to be very shortly. Minister Hannah Martin is really big on vocations. In most of the schools, you have some aspect of it. So you'll have a hotel training section and some. The intention, I'm understanding from the Ministry of Education, is to combine it all in a center that is going to be located at the old Bahamas Academy site on Wolf Road, where they would have an assessment of you. They would have drywalling classes, carpentry class, just what you speak about, only in an organized way, so that by the time you reach in grade 12, you'd be going out now, in addition to school, to industry immersion. So all of us, it would be a boring world if everyone was a lawyer. Then who would fix our cars? Who would build our house? Who would do all the rest of this? And so we're becoming to understand that quite clearly. And the joke I always make is this. I have a cousin in Ragged Island, where I'm from, who makes more money than I do. He's a commercial fisherman. He makes more money than I did when I was new in the profession, and he still makes more money than I make today. And so even if you're looking at that, what we've decided is that young men particularly don't know the value of being able to do these things. They think that it doesn't pay, but most of these jobs pay more handsomely than these office jobs that everyone pushing for.
Well, my grandson is 12, and after COVID, the school that he was at said that he had to repeat the year because he wasn't learning anything. And so we didn't really think that was necessary, not that I'm a teacher. But anyway, so we put him in another school. The school fees were like 3 times more, but he's excelling. He's getting 100% in everything, and it's just the school that he was at was only looking for academics. They were only looking for people who were not bored. People are bored because they're brilliant. They're not bored always because they're stupid. They're brilliant. So that's why you really have to somehow make sure that teachers are really being aware of what they're doing when they talk to children and how they push them forward or how they set them aside. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Honorable Minister. I would like to commend you. Your presentation was quite riveting, and I have learned a lot of knowledge, and I do thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to pour out your wealth of knowledge, and I do thank you for that. My question to you, sir, is what strategies are being deployed by the Ministry of National Security to rehabilitate inmates upon release?
Okay, well, and just a quick overview of how the ministry works. I have oversight of some agencies. I have oversight of the police, but the Commissioner of Police runs the police force. So I can't give any policeman an order, not even a constable. Arguably, the officers assigned to me, I can't even tell them how to dress. We have a joke about the aide to one of my colleagues who always wears a suit, even on the beach. because he say he is the protection officer, and the minister can't tell him how to dress. So I can't give any police officer an order. I have oversight of the Defense Force, but the Commodore and his team runs it. I can't give a Marine seaman an order. I can't. My son is a Marine seaman. I can't even make him do anything, and he is my son. And the corrections is slightly different because I'm supposed to have overall superintendents. So if things get very bad and people die because of negligent thing in prison, it's going to be me and the commissioner in the dock, together with the medical officer at the prison. So I do have a little more involvement, but it doesn't go down to operational matters. So I concern myself more with health and safety matters. So when I got in the chair, I had to concern myself that we institute the proper COVID protocols that Dr. Johnson was asking for. But the actual development of the programs is down to the commissioner and his team. Now that's how it's supposed to be. I'm made to understand that sometimes politicians meddle, but I don't like to meddle. As a lawyer, I've always been taught, I did medical negligence cases. And you can study up on something and get as expert as the expert. But there's a margin at which you must appreciate that you are not the expert. So at the end of the day, the rehabilitative models are driven by the commissioner. So people come to me all the time and say they have these programs. I tell them, go and engage with the commissioner and his persons, because I don't know how they are structuring their program. We have a memorandum of understanding with Corrections Canada, who work with our correctional department to structure things. So I also can't give any prison officer an order to do anything. So I'm the great minister of national security, can't give a police an order, can't give a defense force marine an order, and can't give a correctional officer an order, but I'm their advocate to get what they want. We get to discuss policy initiatives, and I get to decide the policy. So for instance, parole is something that would be a decision for me and not Commissioner Clare, but I would have to listen to Commissioner Clare about whether it's ready. So if we say that to be paroled, you have to have a job, then I'd have to ask Commissioner Clare, are we going to be able to provide jobs for all of these people who need to be paroled? But how we basically run it is the classes were stopped. One of the initiatives that Commissioner Clare and his team has, when we complete the new prison, the facility that is now medium will be turned into classrooms so that BTVI will now have classes on the compound of the correctional institution. When a resident comes out with a certificate in something, it won't say Bahamas Department of Corrections. It'll say BTVI, and it would be a recognized qualification.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
When we organize these things, it is our hope that they come out the way this one has come out. Seriously, with the level of intellectual presentation by the policymaker, the engaged questioning by the questioners, and it just makes the evening just something to be proud about, and that is what we are thankful. You know, President, when I took a group of young people to Atlanta. We visited Georgia Tech University. And Georgia Tech University said they had almost $2 billion worth of contracts at the university. They said, but they noticed that they weren't getting the required number of people to work. And they were inquired as to why that was happening. What they found out was that people from the community were applying for the jobs, but on the application form was, have you ever been convicted of a crime? And so people walked away because they didn't want to answer. They removed that from the application form. And now it's a part of their program to hire people from the community and people who may have been convicted of a crime. But I thought it was interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to now invite the lady who has been the grand organizer of this all, Jeannie Gibson, our policy assistant, to come and give you a vote of thanks. It's been my pleasure.
Protocol having been established, good evening. On behalf of Government and Public Policy Institute, I wish to thank the Honorable Wayne Monroe, Minister of National Security, for serving as the first presenter in our 2023 Meet the Policymakers lectures, and for using the occasion to outline the government's national security policy and the strategy to maintain law and order in the Bahamas. Tonight's discussion, as we've all heard, has been extremely informative, educational, and food for thought. It has given us the opportunity to build on what you have shared here tonight, sir. As we tread the road to 50, it is to our advantage to work with experts, civil society, NGOs, and the church to find solutions that are transformational in moving the Bahamas forward and upward. I wish to thank also the individuals who participate in tonight's program. Mrs. Shivago Lang, our able moderator, Ms. Natasha Williamson for the invocation, Dr. Eric Rollin for the warm welcome, and Ms. Leslie Archer for introducing our presenter. Tonight's event would not have been possible without the assistance of other departments and areas at the university, namely Office of University Relations, HCM Library, IT Department, Campus Police, Physical Plant Department, and of course, our able protocol officers. To all of you, I say thank you for your support and excellence. Finally, but by no means least, I thank you, our audience, who are here in person, and those of you who are watching via Facebook live stream. Thank you for taking the time to attend, to watch, and participate. As I bid you good night, I wish to invite you to continue to support GPPI's upcoming event. On April 5th, we will be hosting Policy Wednesday, where Dr. David Allen and Ms. Keva Bethel will be discussing their trauma study and helping us better understand the concept of the pathology of violence. You can tune in to Guardian 96.9 FM, Z Live, from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m., or you can listen via Zoom by registering at gppi.ub.edu.bs. I bid you good night, and let us stay safe.